You're just a selfish mistake. Those were the only words my father spoke to me that day. No yelling, no anger, just cold, steady truth from a man who raised me for 26 years. I'm Sydney, and until that moment, I thought the worst thing my family could do was ignore me. I was wrong. Hours earlier, my mother had ripped my medical records to shreds in the middle of a hospital lobby, screaming, "You're letting your sister die!" Strangers stared. Nurses froze. I stood there, silent, papers scattering like broken pieces of a life I never got to choose. They said this was about love, about sacrifice. But it wasn't. It was about control. And the one thing they never wanted me to know, that my entire life had been built on a lie. I wasn't a daughter, I was an insurance policy. What they didn't realize, the day they tried to break me in front of everyone, was the day I stopped playing their game. They thought guilt would own me forever. But they forgot one thing. I don't surrender. Not to strangers, not to blood, and definitely not to people who only kept me alive so I could save someone else. Have you ever found out your whole life was a transaction? Tell me in the comments, because what I did next changed everything. The shredded pieces of my medical records clung to the sterile hospital floor like confetti from a celebration I was never invited to. My mother stood over me, chest heaving with a rage that could have burned through steel. "Do you think you get to sit there and act like some sort of victim?" she spat, voice cutting through the hush of the lobby like broken glass. "Your sister is dying, Sydney. Dying. And you're doing nothing. Absolutely nothing." Her words weren't new. They'd been sharpened over years, honed into weapons that fit perfectly in her mouth. Behind the glass wall of room 311, Vera lay in her hospital bed. Pale, fragile, yet still managing that signature smirk. Chemotherapy had stolen her hair, but not her arrogance. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second I hoped for something. Anything human. Instead, her look said everything. "I'm still the center. You're still orbiting." I bent to pick up a few scraps of the file, not out of guilt but because they mattered. Proof. Facts. Something solid that couldn't be twisted like every bedtime story they fed me growing up. "I didn't raise you to be this cold, this ungrateful," Mom hissed, lowering her voice as if volume made it virtue. "We gave you everything." I looked up, meeting her eyes dead on. "You gave me what you thought I owed you for." She blinked. For the first time, silence stretched between us. Not peace, not understanding, just an empty space where her fury had nowhere to land. Then came the scream. "You're letting your sister die!" It ricocheted off the polished walls, loud enough to draw stares. A nurse froze near the vending machine. A security guard turned his head. The shame was a living thing, slithering across my skin. I didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't move. Because I knew this wasn't grief. It was theater. And I wasn't going to hand her an encore. Through the glass, Vera tilted her head, a tiny twitch of her lips curving upward. Ownership. That's all it ever was for her. She didn't need to say a word. The script had been written years ago. Vera wins. Sydney yields. But not today. I walked away from that lobby with the weight of 1,000 eyes on my back. Not one of them stepped in. Not one voice broke the silence. That was the thing about scenes like this. They don't just humiliate you. They isolate you. And isolation? That was the language my family spoke fluently. By the time I reached the far end of the corridor, the clock above the elevator read 10:42 a.m. I remember it because I remember thinking, this is when everything breaks. Not when they scream, but when I don't. I didn't yell. I didn't collapse. I just walked. Because I finally understood something terrifying and liberating all at once. They weren't trying to save Vera. They were trying to prove they could still control me. I found a quiet corner near the consultation lounge, my pulse pounding like enemy fire. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the email I'd kept buried for months. National donor match results. Confidential. The date stamped 6 months ago. The day I took the test before anyone even asked me to. Back when I still believed silence might equal peace. The message was blunt, clinical. No biological compatibility detected. I wasn't a match. Not partial, not marginal, not even close. They knew. Or at least they could have known if they'd cared to ask me. But why ask when assumption makes a better leash? I hit forward, added one recipient. Dr. Holstrom. Subject line, reconfirming non-compatibility for records. CC'd my attorney, Laura Lai. Because if this circus turned legal, I wanted my armor in place before the first shot was fired. I stared at my name in the signature block. Sydney Hale. Not Vera's sister. Not Coraline's daughter. Just me. And for the first time in my life, that felt like a declaration, not a deficiency. When I looked up, Dad was there. Not storming in, not shouting, just standing. Broad shoulders squared like a man who thought the world owed him reverence for existing. He didn't call my name. He never had. His voice was flat, almost bored. You're just a selfish mistake. No raised tone, no venom. Just fact, delivered like weather. Inevitable, unchangeable. And somehow, that hit harder than any scream. I didn't cry. Didn't ask what he meant. That would have given him the dignity of disbelief. Instead, I let the words settle on my skin like wet cement. Heavy, hardening, but not sinking. Behind him, Vera's room glowed like a stage. She didn't move, didn't blink, just watched, like a queen surveying pawns. I stepped sideways, careful not to brush his arm. Once, that might have felt like defiance. Now it just felt like oxygen, necessary for survival. By the time I reached the parking garage, my chest was tight, but my mind? Razor sharp. I had 5 minutes before the rideshare arrived. Just enough time to open my notes app and type 3 sentences that felt like scripture. Tested, October 19th. Results received, October 24th. Not a match. Then, without thinking, I added, you cannot donate what you don't have. You cannot love where you're not allowed to exist. And you cannot stay where you were never really invited. I hit save. My fingers didn't shake. Not anymore. This wasn't about refusal. It was about proof. Proof that I wasn't the villain they needed me to be. And soon, the world would know it too. I thought the worst was over when I walked out of that hospital. I thought the truth I held in my phone was enough to stop the bleeding. I was wrong. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Holstrom. Need to clarify an inconsistency in your file. Can you return today? The phrasing was polite. The subtext wasn't. My stomach tightened like a fist as I typed back, on my way. By the time I stepped into his office, the fluorescent lights felt harsher than before. He sat behind a wide oak desk, hands folded, a manila folder open in front of him like a wound. Ms. Hale, he began, voice low, professional, but edged with something heavier, hesitation. Before we continue, I need to confirm something. When was your last genetic screening? I blinked. October, for the donor test. You have the results. He nodded slowly, tapping the screen of his monitor with his pen. That's the problem. Our system shows 2 sets of data, yours and Vera's, and they don't align. A cold wave slid down my spine. What do you mean, don't align? He didn't answer right away. He just turned the monitor toward me. 2 charts, side by side. Color-coded markers where there should have been overlap. Except there wasn't. Not even close. You are not biologically related, he said finally. 6 words. 6 words that cracked 30 years of reality in half. I stared at the screen, then at him, waiting for a laugh, a qualifier, something. Nothing came. Just silence humming like a live wire between us. My voice caught. I swallowed hard. I'm adopted? He exhaled slowly as if bracing for my next question. That's what the data suggests. We ran it twice to be certain. My first thought wasn't relief. It wasn't even anger. It was something darker, a realization curling like smoke in my gut. They knew. They always knew. Every cold glance, every offhand, "We didn't have to take you in." Every time love felt like a receipt instead of a gift. It all calcified into one brutal truth. I wasn't their daughter. I was their insurance policy. For a long beat, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The room pressed in like a vice. "I'll need documentation," I said finally, my voice alien even to me. "All of it. Printed and notarized." "You'll have it," Holstrom replied quietly. "And Sydney, you have every right to speak to our legal department. What happened here, what was withheld, crosses ethical lines." I stood on legs that felt foreign. The manila folder clutched like a lifeline. My phone buzzed again. Mom's name flashing across the screen. I let it ring. Outside his office, the hospital felt louder than before. Nurses moving like tides, voices overlapping, laughter from somewhere distant. It all sounded wrong, hollow, like the world didn't know it had just shifted on its axis. I reached the east corridor and stopped by a window overlooking the parking lot. Cars glinting in the sun. People living lives that hadn't just detonated. I pressed my forehead against the glass and whispered the only words that made sense. It was never about saving her. It was about control, about leverage, about keeping me on the hook for a debt I never owed. And now? Now they'd tried to bury the truth under layers of guilt and forged paper. But the truth didn't rot. It waited. I turned from the window, spine straight, jaw locked. They thought I was done. They thought silence was my default setting. They were wrong. This wasn't survival anymore. This was war. I walked back into the hospital's media room before the chairs were even cold from Coraline's little gratitude ceremony. The banner still hung, the lights still burned, and the cameras were still rolling down their tripods. She had just erased me on live stream, spinning the story like I never existed. I didn't walk in angry. I walked in ready. Security hesitated when I reached the podium, but my badge was still clipped to my blouse, and I said it clear. "I'm here to speak. It won't take long." No one stopped me. They didn't know what was coming. I placed the manila folder on the podium, opened it slow like a soldier laying down ammunition. "My name," I began, my voice steady enough to cut glass, "is Sydney Hale. You didn't hear that name today, but it matters." Heads turned, phones lifted. "This," I held up the first page, stamped and signed, "is the official test result from the National Donor Registry, dated October. It says I am not a match to Vera Hale. This," I raised another, "is a forged consent form, filed under my name without my knowledge. And this," I tapped the folder, "is proof that my mother received those results 6 months ago and hid them from every doctor in this building." A ripple cut through the crowd like an aftershock. Flashbulbs exploded. "I was adopted," I said plainly. "They never told me. They brought me here under the assumption I could save someone who spent her life breaking me. And when that failed, they tried to use my body to cover their lie." Behind me I heard the gasps, the whispers, then the loud crack of Coraline's composure snapping. She stumbled forward, her voice sharp enough to slice through the static. "Lies, she's unstable, this is vengeance." I turned, calm as stone. "No, this is documentation." I lifted the stamped page, its blue seal catching the light. "Unlike the fake signature you submitted, this one holds up in court." More flashes. A voice from the press shouted, "Do you want revenge or justice?" I didn't even blink. "Neither," I said. "I want no more silence." I stepped down, folder in hand. Behind me, Coraline collapsed. The thud of her body hitting the floor was loud enough to hush the room. Merrick lunged toward her, shouting something drowned by the rising wave of voices. On the monitor, Vera's live feed went black. The cameras followed me as I walked out, my heels clicking like gunfire on tile. No one tried to stop me because they couldn't. Not anymore. By the time I hit the sunlit pavement outside, my hands weren't shaking. Not when I called Laura. Not when I said, Send it all. Every file, every photo, every timestamp. Press first, then legal. She exhaled a sharp breath on the other end. You just blew the roof off, Sid. Good, I said. Let them choke on daylight. For the first time in my life, the truth wasn't buried. It was loud. It was permanent. And it was mine. It's been 7 days since that press conference. 7 days since my name stopped being a whisper and became a headline. Adopted daughter exposes consent forgery in organ donation scandal. Hospital Ethics Board launches investigation. I didn't read the comment sections. I didn't need to. This wasn't about applause or outrage. It was about truth. And finally standing in it without shaking. Coraline, under medical observation. Merrick, silent as the grave he dug for his own reputation. Vera, discharged yesterday. No Instagram sermons. No curated Bible verses. Just digital quiet. And me? I sat on my balcony this morning, coffee black, the city alive beneath me, and for the first time in years, I felt like the air was mine to breathe. Later, the hospital's legal office called. Their voice was calm, almost apologetic. Ms. Hale, your liver was never a viable match. Not marginal, not partial. Even if you'd agreed, it wouldn't have worked. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the brutal irony. They waged a war over something that was never possible. It was never about saving her. It was about owning me. At 4:45 p.m., a text lit my screen. Vera, can we meet? Just us. Please. I went. Not for closure, for confirmation. She sat on a hospital bench, hoodie pulled tight, hospital socks still on her feet. When I approached, she didn't look up right away. When she did, her voice was quiet, flat. They only kept you in case I needed something one day. It landed like frost, cold and weightless because deep down, I'd always known. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she added. Good, I said, because I'm not offering it. No screaming, no dramatic exit. Just two people finally admitting what blood never made us. Family. The next day, I filed the paperwork for a legal name change. Sydney Hale. Mine by choice, not by transaction. Before bed, I opened an envelope I hadn't noticed in the mail stack. No return address. Inside, a note in slanted handwriting. Hi, Sydney. I saw your story. I'm adopted too. I didn't know I could say no either. Thank you for showing me I can. I'm 17. You gave me something I didn't know I was allowed to have. Choice. No signature, just proof, not of pain, of purpose. So, if you're watching this and you've ever felt erased by the people who should have protected you, hear me. Your worth is not up for negotiation. Your voice is not too loud. And you are not alone. Tell me in the comments, what truth would you speak if fear wasn't holding your tongue? Because maybe, just maybe, your story is the one someone else needs to breathe again. And if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe. Stay. Be part of a space where silence isn't survival anymore. It's a choice you never have to make again.